Hello, David Gurteen. It's an honor to have you here. Welcome to our conversation.
Okay, it's good to be here, Mateus.
Yeah, thanks. So I have to admit that I've been following your work on and off for maybe like 8 or 9 years. It's been.
Oh, really? I hadn't appreciated it for so long.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've been following the Gurteen knowledge for a long time. And but you know how it is with the internet. You know, you see a lot of things, and then some things inspire you on some things, and people
exactly,
are
yes.
kind of everywhere.
You go off at tangents in different directions all the time.
Definitely.
It's part of the fun.
But it's great.
It's fun. I love it.
It's great to finally meet you. I remember I got your contact and I sent you a message, and we had some disconnection there, but then you reached back.
We did.
You reached out. So I'm very happy to have you here. It's an honor to have you with us.
Good, thank you.
Okay, so I have, as I mentioned, I have 9 questions for you.
9, okay.
And they vary from work-related, education-related, and of course, knowledge-based, right? And we're going to talk about tech. And so, yeah, let me start off with this question. So about academic trajectories. So what do you think are key attitudes and strategies that a thinker has to develop across the years to make good progress on his field, right? And not necessarily academically, you know, like professionally as well. And personally speaking, how have you managed to stay motivated and focused on your work across time?
Okay, interesting question. Not one I've particularly reflected on in the past. I've been, as you know, I've been publishing my newsletter for 20 years.
Wow.
And so my website's about the same age. I've been blogging probably for a little bit less than that. So I'm asking the question in my head, you know, why have I stuck with it for so long? I think to some degree, the focus has changed for me over those years, at least at one level. So my background is in IT. So originally, when I first started to get involved in knowledge management, it was very much from a technical perspective. And then over time, I started to realize that all the issues were people issues, that the technology was relatively easy. And if I wanted to do something challenging that nobody else was doing, you know, because so many people were getting into IT, and it would be interesting to focus on the people side. So I started to move away from IT and more towards people, but then still in the context of business. And then I guess as I've got older, the issue for me has not really been about business. I think businesses will survive one way or the other. You know, as we kind of see with the pandemic, with global warming, with the classification of the oceans, with the polarization that's going on now in the world, we face some serious problems, and it's only a matter of time, if we're not too careful, you know, before our global civilization, it's in danger of collapsing. And so I'm much more interested in the societal aspects of all of this. But coming back to I'm just giving that as a background, coming back to your question, I guess there's been a passion, at least in me, a passion for knowing and better understanding how the world works, and a passion for humanity, wanting to see us survive. And that hasn't really changed. That's kind of underlying everything. So passion is part of it. Now, if I was giving advice, I'm just trying to think out loud. If I was giving advice to someone today in terms of longer term strategy, in terms of learning, I think a big part of it is making connections with different people, having conversations with those people, even having arguments with those people. You know, it's about we come with a lot of beliefs that are laid down in our childhood through our parents, through our educational system. And so many of those beliefs don't rest on any real evidence at all. And So a strategy for life, if you like, is to question absolutely everything that you've ever learned and continue to question it and to go out of your way to be challenged. I mean, I think when I was younger, I shied away from debate, if you like. As I get older, I actually enjoy it, and I look forward to it, because I've got nothing. There is actually nothing to fear. I think that's the key thing. When you realize that when somebody has got a different opinion to you, and they're going to really, really argue with you, that's nothing to fear. That's a gift. Here now, you really got to justify your thinking, and maybe you're just going to change it, or maybe you're just going to change theirs. It doesn't really matter. But it's having a passion. It's being open-minded to new ideas and other things.
Great.
I think that really answers your question.
It does.
It's an interesting question to reflect on.
Yeah. Well, you address
what might a strategy be?
You address some key aspects, right, of the way the world is developing. So the capacity to talk with someone, getting into an argument without allowing emotion to get in, and allowing yourselves to learn, because I think sometimes people approach conversations in a way that they're already predisposed to not open, and that happens a lot in Latin America. We are unfortunately some years behind in those aspects, at least. So of course this conversation is going to be translated to Spanish, and we're going to have subtitles so people can get into them. Yeah, but definitely, yeah, and the concept of passion, I think it's a key driver, because what else would be a question to ask, right? Like if we don't care about what we do, how are we gonna do it well, right? So
I've just remembered I do reflect on this in a different way, and there's two words that I play with all the time in my head. One is curiosity, and the other is caring. If I think about myself, what's driven me all my life? Curiosity is clearly right up there. I've always been curious. But the other is caring about people, caring about the world, caring about the future. And I often wonder which one's deeper than the other. Does caring drive curiosity, or does curiosity drive caring? Or are they kind of like intertwined? Yeah. And I think I keep coming back to the curiosity bit. The curiosity is for me at least, the fundamental driver.
Yeah, as a professor, as a tutor of philosophy, curiosity is a big driver for me as well. But as well as passion, and the empathy, right? Like what problems do we care in the world? And we're gonna get to one aspect of this on the matter of conversational leadership. We're gonna get there.
Okay.
But first, I would like to ask you, David, about Gurteen knowledge, right? About your work again. So tell us a bit about how it began, right? Like, tell us a bit about your background, like.
Okay.
And did you expect that it was going to arrive to where it is today, like 20 years later? Because it's I have to congratulate you on that. So yeah, tell us the story.
Okay, a quick background. I'll try to keep this short. Going way back, when I was probably 7 or 8 years old, my father took me into the garden one winter's night and showed me the constellations. He'd fought in the desert in the Second World War, so he had slept out under the stars. He knew all the constellations, and I think that was a huge inspiration for me. And I became very, very interested in science, and so my focus of my studies, if you like, was physics. I did physics at university, and I guess then my interest, this is again curiosity, my interest was in the physics of stars. What made a star? How it was, and then when I was 1957, I would have been 8 years old. Sputnik was launched, the first Earth satellite by the Russians, and so I became very, very interested in spaceflight. This all intrigued me, And that's partly why I did a degree in physics. And then I originally started working in British aerospace, which in those days was building some UK satellites and missiles as well, to be honest. And I got into computing. It was mainframe computers then, and I was helping engineers design satellites and use programming in Fortran. And I said that was a long time ago. And then I ended up working for two computer companies. Both no longer exist. One was Prime Computer, and the other was Lotus Development. Some people might remember Lotus because they might well remember Lotus 123, the spreadsheet that preceded Excel. But that's long gone. And so I spent most of my life, rather than in aerospace, I spent it in IT originally as a software developer and later as a development manager. And back in, let me see, about 1989, Lotus shipped Lotus Notes. I don't know if you're familiar with that product. It predated the internet. We're going back 30 years now.
No, I don't know.
And it was one of the first collaborative applications that was built for the internet. Not for the World Wide Web, because that didn't come along until a little bit later. And so I started to work for myself, and I started to develop basically collaborative applications in Lotus Notes. And that was where I started to realize that all the problems and all the issues were to do with the people and not to do with the technology. Lotus Notes was an amazing tool. It still is, actually, in some ways, although it's a little bit of a legacy system now. In so much it was extremely easy to build and actually roll out collaborative applications where people could interact and work together. It really was in some ways a forerunner of the internet and the World Wide Web. But I built applications in those days that people didn't use. In some ways, through no fault of my own, although I guess that's questionable. In so much that the applications were maybe perfect, but it was the people. So if you had an application that required people to collaborate and work together, technically the application would support that, but people wouldn't necessarily do it. And so I started to become a lot more interested in people. And as I go back to about the year 2000, and that's where things started to change, because I started to get a lot more interested in this newfangled idea of knowledge management, about how we manage our knowledge. And that was very much in a business context at the time, but now it's much more in a societal context. So there's sort of some sort of path there. That's got some coherence, if you like.
Amazing. So now going a bit to the theoretical side, we got a bit in talking about philosophy on our past conversation that we had off camera, and a question that is really something that I care deeply about is and I would love to hear your take on it. So what do you consider the role of the philosopher is in the transformative age, right? In one of your blogs, you spoke about that we're going through a transformative age, right? And a question that not haunts me, but interests me is what is the role of the philosopher?
What's the role of a philosopher, given that you're a philosopher? And by any stretch of the imagination, I wouldn't call myself a philosopher. I'm interested in philosophy.
Yeah.
I'm not as well read in it as I might be. But what's the role? I guess the first thing to say, I think there is a role there, and I think it's important. I'm just having difficulty, maybe articulating what it might be. A big part of it is I'm not so sure that most of us, and I'll include myself in this, and anytime I criticize anybody or anything, I include myself in it, because I'm as susceptible to omissions and errors as anybody. I think we need to reflect a lot more on who we are as human beings, where we've come from, where we're heading. In particular, knowledge, in particular, how we form our beliefs and how we act on those beliefs. Because the one thing I've learned, both through experience and through a lot of reading, is that we're not rational creatures in any sense. It's got to be around making better sense of the world and making better sense of who we are, where we've come from, and where we're heading. Because that is so important. If we're going to survive, to my mind, if we're going to survive, we've got to stop fighting. I guess a lot of the time that might involve politicians, but I think philosophers have got a lot to give as well, in terms of, as I say, it's all comes down to understanding, doesn't it?
To understanding.
What's your thought on that? You clearly thought about it maybe more than I have.
Sure. So I agree with you with your comment, in the sense that, well, maybe I would qualify as being a philosopher in some definitions of the word, but others I would not really, because the true philosopher, in my view, is someone that really passes the test of time, the test of time in history, and becomes a philosopher. I studied philosophy, and I'm a teacher. I teach philosophy, but I think that the way in which meaning is shifting in this postmodernist world, right, the subjective world, where there are many right answers, the philosopher must speak out, because for a long time, I think philosophy has been strictly a matter of a few people on a few departments of philosophy. And I think if we have a knowledge crisis in some parts of the world, well, people that study knowledge, at a certain profound degree should get into the conversations, as you said, get into the debates, talk a bit more with respect, with professionalism. I think that would be it.
I think one of the interesting things now is that, well, whether your passion is philosophy or whatever, is that we can connect across the world like this in environments like Zoom, and have these conversations. Okay, here it's just you and me, but we could have a whole lot more people here in this conversation. And so, just people from different cultures, different backgrounds, people who have read differently, because there's a lot of people alive today who are still having a big influence on me, that there are so many people from the past. Okay, now it's going to be through books and things that just have a massive impact on me. For me, people like Henry David Thoreau, familiar with him. I used to live very close to Walden Pond, and I didn't know who he was until I visited Walden Pond one day and discovered his hut by the lake there. But he's long dead, but his ideas, his insights, his philosophy lives on. And okay, he's just one man, and he's not particularly known as a philosopher. Well, no, he was a philosopher, but we've got a massive opportunity today, haven't we, to connect like this for the first time in history. If I think about my father, and I go back 50 years, my father and my mother. So no TV, no internet, no car, no international transport. Their information window on the world was the BBC Home Service, which was really a radio service, which was really a British government propaganda service more than anything. And it was a working man's tabloid in the UK called the Daily Mirror. Any book that they borrowed, well, any book they had, they would have borrowed from the library. Any conversations they would have had would have been with family and friends. That's it.
That's it.
You think about that how isolated that was, and the access to knowledge and the access to conversations compared to today. And you think what we're doing now, which my mother couldn't have dreamt of 50 years ago, 60 years ago.
Definitely.
So there's this massive opportunity to learn from each other rather than fight. Unfortunately, there's a bit much fighting going on.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we're going to get to that as well. I have a question relating to this.
Okay.
So about leadership, I would like to hear a bit about your views on leadership. And I read in your blog that you consider leadership as a group endeavor. And I think this is a fascinating idea because it breaks a paradigm, right? It's a shift. Could you tell us a bit about this?
That's interesting. I'm not too sure I've written about it explicitly as a group endeavor. I've never used those words, but maybe you've seen something in my words that I hadn't appreciated.
Maybe.
I mean, if you Google leadership,
maybe it's the negative. It's that it's not an individual. It's one of the where you wrote, and there's a Harvard professor that explains about leadership, and it's it makes a dichotomy on authority and like the classic definition of leadership and a kind of new way of.
I mean, that's the big difference for me, is that most people see leadership as a position of authority. So if they talk about an organization, they talk about the senior managers, they talk about the senior leaders, they are their positions of authority. And that's how most people see it. But for me and the guy at Harvard whose name I've temporarily forgotten,
me too. I can look it up.
See leadership as a practice, not as a position of authority, which means that anybody, any one of us, can step forward and practice leadership at any time. So in an organizational context, in a community context, and really in any context, if you, as an individual, see something that needs doing, something that needs fixing, something that needs taking on, you have got the ability. Well, if you have got the ability, you can step forward and lead. And maybe if you don't have the ability to do that, you let somebody else step forward and lead. And when you finish what you're doing, you can step back. But it's a practice. And the gentleman, as you just flashed on the screen, is Von Heifetz.
Ronald Heifetz, that's
Ronald Heifetz, yes, at Harvard. And he's been studying leadership, I think, most of his life. So probably 40, 50 years he's been studying leadership.
Wow.
And that's something he teaches. So for me, when I see a lot of the problems in the world, and actually he says this, I think in the little video he effectively says this, we shouldn't be waiting for our leaders, our appointed leaders, to necessarily step forward and tackle all the problems that we face. But each and every one of us has got the choice, has got the opportunity to take responsibility and step forward in our own, arena and do something, rather than complain about it. The funny thing is, I'm a big fan of Stephen Covey, because I discovered his book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People back in 1989.
I read it
way back. And he's got the concept, I think he stole it from somewhere, but it's the concept of your circle of concern and your circle of influence. And your circle of concern is always much larger than your circle of influence. So I can be concerned about refugees in Southeast Asia. Can I do anything about it? Almost certainly not. But there's a central piece, my circle of influence, where things more local to me, things that sort of fall within my domain of ability or capability, where I can make a difference. And and what he's saying is focus on that circle of influence, focus on the things that you can do, but also at the same time look to expand that circle of influence and sort of decrease your circle of concern and expand your circle of influence. And I think that's something that I would like to see more people sort of see that, accept that, and simply do what they can, however small, however large, because I think each and every one of us has got the ability to do something. And
the question is,
these days, 8 billion people in the world. You can make a big impact on the world overnight if everyone adopted that philosophy. It's unlikely to happen in a hurry. But,
that's
a nice thought.
The motivation, right? The from being passive to being active, right? To doing. So, and on the other element of this concept about conversation, you talk about the power of face-to-face conversations, right? How do you think that is changing in COVID-19, right? Because as we said, we're having this, that is, it's very difficult to have a conversation like we're having right now. But did we lose something special because of the face-to-face aspect of it? What are your thoughts on the difference of the digital versus the physical aspect of conversation?
I mean, I think I've been pleasantly surprised with Zoom, the degree to which you can have a conversation with anybody in the world, and not just one-on-one like we're doing now, but with groups of people. I've been running my knowledge cafes where I might have 20, 30 people having conversations, and it works amazingly well. I never thought it would work as well as it does, but it does. At the same time, I can never quite articulate it or put my finger on it. There really is something missing compared to a face-to-face conversation. And of course, that they reckon in face-to-face conversation that there's a lot more going on in terms of body language. You can see the whole person. There's more noise around you as well. That's in some strange sort of way, although maybe distracting, somehow adds to the conversation. I can remember years ago organizing, I had a good friend who had a beautiful riverboat on the River Thames, and I ran one of my knowledge cafes as best I could on the boat, and people broke up into pairs and found a spot on the boat to have a conversation. I can remember just leaning over the railing on the boat with somebody having a chat. So we're talking about something quite deep. Of course, as we did, we would spot a mother duck with her babies in tow, just bobbing along the water, and you'd stop for a moment and just appreciate the ducks. And then we'd see a heron, in the reeds by the edge of the water, or you could see the clouds reflected. It was a gorgeous summer's day, and those things weren't a distraction. It caused us to pause. And again, neither of us could, because we talked about it afterwards, neither of us could articulate quite what it was, but it was just those distractions of a beautiful summer's day. And of course, you just don't get anything like that.
The moments.
So, but having a conversation in a coffee shop, again, is very different. There's a lot of noise, a lot of people coming and going. You're having the conversation with somebody. You stop and you look up. You notice something going on at the same time. Know what it is? It's those little distractions that, in some strange way, add add to the conversation. And so again, I can't quite articulate it, but there's something missing from the electronic communication.
I agree. It's a different experience, right? It's a different experience. It's a different thing. It has its pros, but I completely get this this part that it's lacking, right? And I think human beings are social by nature, right?
Yes, exactly.
Hyper social. We need stuff like this, right? And that's one of the reasons I'm worried about how this pandemic is playing out. Like, I think we haven't really seen the damage that has been going on, you know, underwater.
I think the biggest thing that concerns me is people and organizations who think that it's going to be perfectly okay working remotely, never going in to the office.
Yeah, it's risky,
and that just seems crazy to me, because I mean, I've been working from home now for again, what's it, 18 months. And,
yeah, me too.
It's driving me rather crazy. I just I'm okay, you know, compared to a lot of people. I'm fine.
Yeah.
But you just need that. You just need that human interaction, and it's the you know, it's the serendipitous conversations that you have in an office environment that you're, you know, if you've got an internal canteen or restaurant, you get to meet people there that you might not normally talk to. Just walking through the corridor, you get to meet people. You stop and have a conversation. It's all those little conversations that you have during the day. That's, you know, that's a really important for getting to know what's going on in the organization. Really important, I think, for when it comes to creativity and innovation. And just working from home is, but a lot of people, clearly enjoy it because they don't have to interact.
Yeah,
they can avoid people. I'm always telling my wife, because my wife's been working from home, and she likes to do everything by email and by text. And I say, no, pick up the phone and talk to them. You know, okay, you can't see them face to face, but at least pick up the phone and talk. It's way better than text.
In many ways, they're calling it, it's this de-skilling, right? Like, we're losing some of those, perhaps we're losing some of those skills. So moving on the concept of collective sense making, right? In a world of, as you mentioned, 8 billion people, how could we as individuals move, or as societies, right, move towards a world with more sense? Because it's a real challenge, right? People from different sides of the world, and you mentioned something very interesting about developing, that we should aim at least to develop true beliefs, right? How many are going on, and how can we make more sense? It is a tough question, but I mean, that's why we're here, right? To ask interesting questions.
Exactly. What's interesting here is very recently, within the last few months, I came across, let's get this title right, The Argumentative Theory of Human Reasoning by Hugo Mercier and Dan Sperber, I think, are the names of the two cognitive researchers. And this theory isn't widely accepted, but it's an interesting theory. We pretty much know, if we look at human reasoning, we're not very good at it. Go to Wikipedia and you'll find over 100 human cognitive biases. We can talk more about some of those in a moment if we wish.
Yes.
And it's kind of strange that you know, evolution has shaped our reasoning ability, and as individuals, we're so bad at it. And their theory is that we've actually got it wrong, that evolution didn't shape our reasoning abilities to reason as individuals. They shaped our reasoning abilities to reason socially, to reason argumentatively. So the basic idea is that each and every one of us has got a view, has got an opinion on something. And the chances are, given our different backgrounds and diversity, that it's different to everybody else.
Yeah.
And what evolution has done is given us the mental prowess, if you will, to argue stubbornly our point of view, our individual point of view. I am right about this. I'm going to argue it to the death. And you are right about your view, different, and you're going to argue
to the death.
But by doing that together, and hopefully doing it without hostility, without killing each other, then we're going to come up socially as a group with a better solution, or a better answer, or a better truth. So what it's saying is that as human beings, we were designed to argue. Again, not in a hostile passion. This is not about, well, it is about emotion, but it's not about fighting. It's not about killing. It's not about screaming and shouting. It's about me taking my argument and honing it and articulating it carefully to you, and you taking your arguments and doing the same to me, and together we hopefully come up with a synthesis, or you prove me wrong, or I prove you wrong, or whatever. We come up with a better explanation, a better outcome,
the reasons.
And
actually, there's this a Scottish philosopher, David Hume, has a quote on this. He said,
I think so, yes.
Yeah, he said, the truth emerges from friends having good arguments, You see, he touched those elements, and I agree, because when there's the disgust or the hate in between, it's impossible to arrive at anything, right? Like, because it becomes something, and that's where the cognitive biases, that's the nuance aspect, right? Like, it's not only the big emotions, also the little, perhaps even subconscious, lateral little emotions that people produce. It is a really difficult thing to produce a good explanation about the world.
Yes, it is, yes.
Right.
I mean, I think whether evolution did evolve us that way or not, I like to think it did, but there's still plenty of evidence, and just from my own experience, that having those conversations do help us get closer to the truth of things. I know if the friend I mentioned who had the boat, he was what I call a contrarian, and he was somewhat of a philosopher. He studied philosophy at university.
What is a contrarian?
He would argue with me about anything.
I'm sorry. What is a contrarian? Someone that says the opposite?
Oh, he would just always take the opposite point of view.
Okay, I got it.
And but usually, I felt, for the fun of it, he enjoyed a good argument. And we used to have some humdingers of arguments, and sometimes they did get a little bit nasty, unfortunately. But we were good friends, so we there was a good relationship there, so we always stayed together. But of course, when you've had an argument and you feel that and you go away afterwards and you feel that you were right, but somehow in the argument you felt that you lost, you actually lost it, you go away and it stays with you for days. You're looking for, what could I have said? Where was he wrong, but I didn't pick him up on, and it really does provoke some really deep thinking. So I can see a lot in that. What's just touching on something else here? There was another book again, came out probably last year, called Impossible Conversations by a gentleman called Peter Bakassian. He's, I think he's an associate professor, I think of philosophy at Portland State University. And he's looking at how to have what he calls impossible conversation. An impossible conversation might be, say, I don't know, if you're pro-Trump, having or anti-Trump, you know, having that sort of argument, if you will, or in this country about Brexit. So, you know, conversations that seem almost futile because people are so entrenched in their views and can get very emotional, you know, and even hostile in the conversation. So he had written this book called Impossible Conversations. And there's a lot of good advice in that book as to how to have those conversations. But I think slightly before then, myself and a good friend in Toronto, a guy called David Creelman, we were talking about the same topic. And we came to the conclusion that we needed for those sorts of conversations, we needed some rules. A bit like say, imagine a game of football or rugby or any competitive sport like that, where there were no rules. No. Imagine a game of American football.
What would it be?
Without any rules. Okay, you know, you still have to get the ball over the line or whatever. But
the rest is open. Yeah. David, are you with us? Let me pause I'm going to pause the video.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
No, we were looking at what rule.
David, let me just. Oh, okay. Yes, you were saying, David. Yeah. Having some.
Okay, you were recording that, right? No, yeah. we were saying that you needed some rules, some conversational rules to engage in difficult, you know, impossible conversations where there was likely to be hostility, given the depth of feeling on either side. So these weren't rules of necessarily a good conversation, but to have a safe conversation. And we came up with something like 14 different rules, and we basically said that you know, you didn't necessarily have to take on all of these, but if you were trying to design, if you like, or convene some difficult conversations, that these are maybe the sort of rules you might like to abide by. So, you know, the first one is to act in good faith. That this isn't about cheating. This isn't about winning. This is about, you know, searching for the truth. And if one side is in some way playing a game, cheating in some way, underhand, that's not going to be a constructive conversation. Another rule was about showing respect for the other person, not launching ad hominem attacks. Yes. What else did we have? We had things like taking responsibility for the conversation. So if there's more than one person in the conversation and somebody was being cut out of the conversation, either deliberately or inadvertently, that you wouldn't rely on, if you like, the host to bring them in, that each and every one of you would be looking to ensure the quality of the conversation. To follow the covenant rules that we have. We call it a covenant, a conversation covenant, to follow the rules, even if you're the person you were, you know, having a debate with, if you will, disobeyed them. So we had something like 14 different rules that we thought if people coming into a difficult or impossible conversation agreed to abide by those rules beforehand, then
very interesting.
You could at least have a conversation without hostility.
Wow.
You wouldn't still necessarily come to a good conclusion. It still might be very emotional and very heated, but you wouldn't have sort of fight or flight type behaviors.
I didn't know about this. I didn't know about this idea. Well, I've read about, of course, all of the the ad hominem, all of those argumentative principles, right? The Strawman, all of those, and of course the principle of charity, right? The principle of charity, charitable interpretation.
Yes, exactly. Yes, that was another one of them. Give the benefit of the doubt. Yes,
the benefit of the
because
doubt.
Often when you're in a heated conversation, you say things that you don't mean, or you bad choice of words, and you need the ability to take them back and say, "Hey, I really didn't mean that."
Nice. Yeah, that's very interesting. I'm going to look it up. Actually, you said impossible conversation from Portland State Uni. Acacia. You said the author name, last name.
His name was Peter Bakassian.
Macasia, I'm sorry.
Bakassian. No, the book's interesting, and through the book, he introduced me through the book to another gentleman whose name I'm going to forget, but he does things called it's called street epistemology, and basically the guy who's doing it is effectively acting out a modern day Socrates. He if you Google him or you go to YouTube, you will find
street epistemology.
Street epistemology. And what he's doing, he's mainly stopping students on campus. And he's asking them to share with him something that they strongly believe. And he explains to them he's going to question them with an aim to
find the truth, like
get them to think more deeply about
correct method. That's very cool. That's very
cool. He's going to challenge their beliefs, and are they happy for him to do that?
He should be careful though, because he could share the fate of Socrates, right? Yeah,
he could share the fate of Socrates.
The problem of public philosophy, right? But
go take a look. There's maybe 50 or 60 videos of these conversations. And he uses some of the techniques that Peter Bakassian uses, and I quite like them. So the two I clearly remember, but there are a lot more, is you'll say to somebody, on a scale of 0 to 100, percentage-wise, how sure are you about this belief? And so one young woman says, I'm 100% sure that I'm the daughter of my mother.
Oh.
100%. Yeah. Then of course she can't be 100% sure, and just with a little bit of light questioning, she revises it down to 90%.
It's a tough thing.
So that's the one question, because what he's doing when he does that, he's getting a feel for just how dogmatic they are about their belief. If they say 100%,
then
he knows he's going to have great difficulty persuading them that maybe there's some doubt. About their belief. So that's the one thing he does. And then the other question, and I really like this question, he then says, what evidence would I have to provide to you for you to question your belief? So someone says, 100%.
Nothing. If they say nothing,
if they say nothing, and it's 100%. It's dogma. I mean,
that's dogma.
It's going to be almost impossible to shift them. But of course, most people will play this game, if you like. It's a little bit of a game, really, with him, and they will give him something, and the conversation unfolds, and a lot of the time he totally fails to move them at all, and other times, they completely collapse. They completely have a turnaround in their view, in their opinion, and it's just beautifully done. And I think we need to see a lot more of that.
I agree. And a lot less of what we have on like Twitter, on the comment section of some of the comment sections, Instagram, Facebook. It's completely clear to me that the thing is. We should go in that direction. So, well, coming to a close here, because we have a few minutes to close it down to 1 hour. I have last two questions. So they're about Mindshop, right? Or Knowledge Society. So I would like to ask you a question about the way we are working right now, the way we are operating right now. So I think people today don't take the time to take care of those trees that take hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years to grow. You know? And my intention with Mindshop is for it to flourish and last longer than any of us, you know, keep going independently of who's leading it and who's, you know, teaching on it and who's learning on it as a force through time. And on this note, as we just mentioned by coincidence, many thinkers have gotten into trouble by studying and teaching philosophy over the years, as we mentioned. So how could we have a significant and constructive, of course, impact in the world without sharing the fate of Socrates, right? And without getting entangled with government agendas, private agendas, you know, what could you recommend to us in this sense?
I wish I had a good answer to that. I'm not too sure I do. Way back last year, I did a couple of my knowledge cafes on something I entitled "We are not enemies, we are friends," which came from a speech. Those words came from a speech from Abraham Lincoln, and I think this is the big challenge, or it's the root of the challenge, is that when people have got a different opinion to us, we see them as enemies. And the first thing we need to do is to, again, coming back to this argumentative theory of human reasoning, is to see them as friends, to see the fact that someone's got a different opinion to you, to be pleased, to be delighted, to say, oh, like, tremendous. Now we can have a real conversation and see if we can't come up with a better belief, with a sense of things, make a better decision, innovate more wisely, whatever it is. But how you get people to realize that, you know, we are friends and not enemies is a big part of the challenge. I mean, there is one thing going on there that's I've kind of learned, is that the vast amount of, you know, of what we know, our knowledge, is not knowledge at all. So let's just take global warming, or human-made global warming, that we get plenty of argument over that. I will say, and I'll say it in all due respect, what does Greta Thunberg know about global warming? She knows absolutely nothing. But you or I don't know enough about it either. We've not read the scientific papers, we've not analyzed the scientific papers. We're not climate scientists. Even if we read them, we couldn't make sense of them. We don't have the knowledge that global warming is a reality. We trust the scientific community. Yes.
Well, yeah,
so it's not about knowing it. It's about trusting knowledgeable people, and that's true of.
We actually have a course
of our knowledge. You know, I believe the Earth goes around the sun. Could I prove it? No. Practically, the sun rises in the east, it sets in the west. The Earth's not spinning. I can't feel the Earth spinning. It's pretty clear the sun goes around the Earth, you know. But I believe the Earth goes around the sun, and I don't really know why, other than I've been told. And I could go on. So actually, probably before coming to this idea that we're friends, not enemies, is to realize just how tenuous our so-called knowledge is. The vast majority of stuff that we argue about, we know nothing about. We've got
that's perfectly clear.
If it's two people, we've got touring number of people with dogmatic beliefs that were maybe formed in their childhood, fighting it out. If we could communicate to people how crazy that was, then just maybe they would say, okay, you're right. We're not enemies. We're friends. We need to have these conversations. But
yeah.
Quite how we do that, I'm still working on it.
We have a course actually on the Anthropocene, you know, on the idea that there are several effects in the world that are happening due to man-made global warming, climate change, and we have three PhDs, three doctors on it, and they would love to have this conversation with you. I haven't had the course, but yeah, I mean, I've read some of the papers, especially not the hard ones, not the most profound ones, much more popular ones, and that's a knowledge gap that needs to be closed, right? The knowledge gap in the sense of there's some knowledge that is not accessible to everyone. There's some concepts that, well, we don't have time to think about them.
No, we don't. No. That's the problem. We've got to take the vast majority of knowledge on trust.
Yeah,
I mean, our whole human society relies on trust. You know, when I get when I go to supermarkets and I buy food, I trust the manufacturers not to have poisoned it. When I travel on the train, I trust the person next to me not to be an axe murderer. I mean,
definitely.
Trust is a.
There has to be trust. I agree.
You know, again, human beings, our human society has we've evolved as social creatures and passed knowledge down through through our culture.
Yeah, also in trust in technology, right? Trust in algorithms, trust in tech.
Yep.
But I mean, that's why digital literacy, scientific literacy, and critical thinking need to be more spread out, because people have to be able to prove if something is, how trustworthy it is, using the percentage, right? Is it like 5% trustworthy, or is it 50? Not even put a number.
I mean, we should start thinking in terms of black and white and start thinking more in terms of probability and percentages.
Yeah, like true or not true.
And a lot of this goes back to our school education. Have you come across the word oracy? Do you know the word oracy?
I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
Oracy, O-R-A-C-Y, oracy.
Oracy.
You're familiar with literacy and numeracy, but have you heard of oracy?
No, I haven't.
In educational circles, we make a big fuss about numeracy and literacy. So literacy, the ability to read and write.
Yeah.
Numeracy, the ability to manipulate numbers. Oracy, the ability to have a good conversation, to listen and articulate your views. The word oracy was only invented, I think, in the 1960s. There wasn't a word up until then. Somebody invented it. How do you
spell that?
Oracy needs to be taught in schools.
Oracy? Oracy.
Oracy. O-R-A-C-Y.
A-C-Y. Oracy. As in oral. Oracy. Okay, oracy. The ability to speak and understand spoken language, a measure of disability. Nice. That's a great one as well. Oracy. And
in some schools, it is being taught. It's
oracy.
Oracy.
Definitely. Yeah, the capacity to have a good, clear conversation. Very, very cool. So we're on to the last question, David.
Okay.
We could go on for hours.
I think we could.
But we have to, this time constraint, we can do this again sometime later for sure. So the last question is a thought experiment so we go into the future, right? Let's imagine this Mindshop, right? The Knowledge Society lasts for a considerable amount of time, whatever time we put it, right? So what message would you send into the future to the future learners, people that are trying to learn, whatever their curiosity desires, send them to, whatever their intuition, whatever their passion leads them to. What recommendation would you give to future learners of the world?
I think it would be something about history. It's about understanding the history of humankind. I don't think we comes back to what I was saying earlier. I think it's really important that we understand what it is to be human. And I was never taught that in school. I often talk about knowledge management, and I say that knowledge management wasn't born in the 1990s. It was born 50,000 years ago with the cognitive revolution. The Homo sapiens has been on this planet for, we've been here for 200,000 years. For the first 150,000 years of that, we were pretty much like, we lived pretty much like modern day apes. About 50,000 years ago, spoken language evolved. And with it, our ability to culturally pass down our knowledge rather than pass it down genetically. And that's what makes us who we are. And then we've got 50,000 years of evolution since then, where we haven't, as humans, body-wise and mentally, we haven't changed. It seems we haven't changed that much, but it's our culture. So it wasn't. It was what, another 45,000 years or so to the invention. Well, the growth of cities, the development of written language, books, modern states. That understanding that history of where we've come from and who we are, that needs to be. When I was taught history in schools, it was kings and queens of England and battles and things that were won and fought. It wasn't the history of who we were as a human race, and that's what I think. And if we're not careful, that'll get forgotten. And I just feel that's really important that we understand.
It's a very good answer. I ask this. This is always my last question, as the first question is always the same. So,
what's the message that you would?
I don't know. I'm still thinking about it. I'm still thinking. That's why I ask it so much. I think I plan on creating a structure that outlives me eventually in my. So I have to think hard and seriously about it, but I'll get there. I'll get to the answer, and you have helped a lot in this sense. So thank you very much, David. It's been an honor. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you,
getting the chance to talk to you after reading so much across the years. Being an inspiration and really nurturing my curiosity and this thirst for knowledge, either with articles, quotes, with books, with many things over the years.
Yeah. There you are. You got a new word, obviously. Word for your vocabulary.
Yeah, definitely. So that's one to add there. It's a skill we definitely need to polish as a mankind.
I think so.
Yeah. All right. Well, David, have a nice day. I'm on to rest a little bit. I'm kind of, with still the effects from the vaccine, but I'll have some rest and I'll get better. All right.
Okay. Thank you, Mateus.
Have a good day. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.